Hey, what is going on everybody? Ace Tactics here, coming at you with a new video. This is going to be the next video in the M2C Explained series. I recently just wrapped up a video on the M2C Zero Rebound Shock Caps. Watch this video if you want to get the in-depth details as to how amazing not only the caps are, but the pistons are as well. I'm going to go into detail on each one of these parts, but today the focus is going to be on the rear hinge pin kit. So, let's see how quickly I can get this thing ripped apart so I can throw the rear hinge pin in and give you the details as to why this part is amazing. Let's do it. There we go. Alright guys, so I basically got the whole rear end removed. Again, that was just as simple as removing this bolt from the body and the 4 main screws that hold on the rear bulkhead. The whole piece comes off, and in order for me to really focus the attention on the rear hinge pins, I just want to take everything off of this thing. I think it's mounted in 6 main points. The 2 bottom points at the bottom of the shock tower, as well as the wing mount. These 2 bolts go through into the ears of the bulkhead. First I'm going to remove the body posts. Those are just standalone pieces that stick into the shock tower. Let's get those out. You'll notice that I put actual M3 nuts on the opposite ends of this. Even though this is an aluminum hot racing bulkhead, especially if you have a composite bulkhead, I would for sure recommend putting this little nut on. But even with aluminum, I'm still putting that nut on just as an added layer of protection. 2mm. Get the wing mount removed. This one is a 2.5. This is also a 2.5. Okay. Wing mount has been removed. All right, well, just a quick heads up, I'm going to be doing a replacement with 3D RC. I mean, look at these things. They are just insanely bendable, and really confident that the bendability in these is going to make some game-changing results. 3D RC, guys, link will be in the description. Now, one of the things I wanted to kind of show here is when looking at the damage done, I mean, you can see a major bend here. You can see a crack happening right here. You can also see the bend that happened on the hot racing, pretty significant bend. And the other crazy thing that I just now noticed is I never pulled this out. Like, this is missing, and it basically is one of the main 2 screws that go in there. So especially when you're going into a bulkhead like this one, which is aluminum, use blue Loctite to go in. A metal to metal situation, always use at least blue Loctite. I wouldn't recommend using red Loctite, but I didn't, and I should have. All right, so let's go ahead and get this out. Look how short that is. Oh, I thought that would be a longer piece. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and pull the hot racing off. So let's get the M2C and do a comparison. So right here, I'm actually just gonna throw back to some old footage back in the day when I had the rear hinge pin brace on. I mean, I have no idea what Arrma was thinking about. It was one of the first things to break on my vehicle from a gnarly landing. That's why I replaced it with the hot racing before I really knew about M2C. All right, so let's talk about the hot racing piece and the M2C racing piece side by side, and just really quickly go over the design differences in structural integrity. Now, if you look at this from the top, you can almost be like, oh, the hot racing is actually thicker. But when you turn and look, you can see how much hollowed out the hot racing piece actually is. In fact, the weak point where it bent was right here, where if you look really closely, you can actually see that they've thinned out this section here even more, and that thinness goes all the way back, all the way down. So the end of this little line right here is actually an indication that the thickness of this is right at 3 millimeters. Even more of that thickness gets taken away as they've shaved out for the screw itself. Whereas the hot racing is first and foremost 6 millimeters, the whole thing, 6.6 millimeters thick. And then this is a very integral structural point, if you will. So as the screw goes through, it leaves a good 3 millimeters of thickness past the coned section. Whereas on the hot racing, when you push this thing down in there and drop it in, there's only 3 millimeters of thickness here in the first place altogether. And then when you account for that coned section, it actually drops it down to about right there, which is basically what, 1.62 millimeters of just straight strength. So that's a huge difference, and that's the reason why it bent here, to be completely honest with you. So there's that. Now when it comes to the weight of M2C, is 0.4 ounces. Hot racing is also 0.4 ounces. So they basically weigh the same amount. Now the other difference between the M2C and the hot racing is you have no choice but to just basically stick the pin in here and it just holds it in. There's no captured section on the end. Whereas with M2C, we're going to be putting the screw through and tightening a bolt and bolting this thing down. And it's going to create basically a shield around the whole bulkhead, which I'll get into in a minute. But as far as the structural integrity goes, that's the difference between hot racing and M2C at least. All right, so that's the rear. Now let's take a look at the front end. And there's plastic pieces falling out on this as it is. All right, so, okay, here we go. So you'll notice here that there's an extra Delrin piece that comes with, so that you could, if you need to down the road when you're doing some maintenance, actually replace these. Now, the nice thing about the replacing feature of this is because this is such a friction point for the whole setup, instead of it doing it to the metal, you can actually allow that kind of wear to happen to a replaceable part. That's the whole purpose of why they put Delrin pieces in here. And the Delrin is actually really strong and it lasts quite a long time, but the degradation that comes from wear and tear goes to these Delrin pieces instead of to the metal. That way you can just replace these and retighten up your whole setup down the road if you find that it's getting a little bit loose, right? So it comes pre-installed with the 2 Delrins already in it, and it comes with an extra one. All right, so basically this thing is the real strength, right? I mean, you can see how jacked up this composite piece is. This is what will replace it. We're talking 6 millimeters of thickness versus, and this is high grade material, whereas this is your chintzy aluminum that is a hell of a lot thinner, right? So I don't even really feel like there needs to be much said more about this. Similarly to the rear, just captures it with a butt stop end. Okay? Whereas with M2C, if you take a close look at all of their pins, which they do provide an extra one if you do bend one, which you're less likely to bend these pins because they're made out of hardened steel versus your, I mean, you can tell that, you can see that bend, right? Okay. Now, let's go ahead and get this installed. Get this out of the way and do a little cleanup. All right, so now let's go ahead and get everything installed. As you can see right here, I've got the rear end of my vehicle laid out, ready to go. I did go in and add the new M2C droop screws into my RPM A-arms. So I will be dropping another video, M2C explained video on the droop screws, so keep an eye out for that. Now, first thing I want to do is just lay it out to show you the order of things, starting with the rear hinge pin. And I'm actually going to lay out the front hinge pin system as well so you can see how that looks. I'm not going to necessarily make another video to go over the entire front end installation. It's pretty much going to be similar to the rear end, except for you'll be dealing with the front end, right? But there are a few little details that I want to share with you guys today so that you know and understand and that you're prepared for the front installation hinge pin kit. But let's talk about the rear first here. So let me just lay this out the way it's supposed to look. Now, I'm gonna twist the setup towards this perspective, all right? So this one goes on the inside here, like so, with the Delrin inserts facing inward. The rear one goes like this with the Delrin inserts facing inward. Okay, now again, M2C does provide an extra pin. If you look closely at these, you can see you've got longer threads on one end and you've got shorter threads on the other. The shorter thread is gonna be for the actual flat nut that comes in the package. So let me go ahead and just cut this stuff all out here. Dump it out here, like so. And as you can see here, there's a sticker on the packaging that says red Loctite is strongly advised for 4mm flat nuts. All right, so these right here are your lock nuts. These right here are the flat nuts. Okay, so flat nuts are gonna go on the inside of the vehicle. And then you're gonna put a Delrin washer. Then you're gonna take your pin with the shorter threads. Then you're gonna put your lock nuts on the outside, and in between those, you'll have another Delrin washer. Okay, these are the 4 screws that come with the packaging, and you'll notice they're all 4 the same length. But the M2C hinge pin is much thicker, so you need longer ones, right? For the rear, and this here for the front. Now right now, I would like to explain a few perks of the M2C rear hinge pin kit. This also goes for the front hinge pin kit. Now I have an aluminum hot racing rear bulkhead, but I bought it because after a bad landing and running just the stock components, I ended up tearing up the mounting points, these 4 mounting points on the front and the rear. They just ended up breaking off of the composite diff house. M2C's hinge pin kit is so much stronger than stock that you'll notice people like Rich Duper Bash, RC Dude 81, they actually still run the composite or plastic differential houses or bulkheads because they run M2C parts. This little shield that goes around it protects the plastic so well that they're able to do what they do without these components breaking. So instead of going out and spending, $50, $60 on the upgraded bulkhead, they went and they picked up the actual hinge pin kit because it's so strong, it protects the plastics. Now, getting the hot racing or any other third-party bulkhead is still an upgrade because having the combination of the M2C hinge pin kit combined with an aluminum bulkhead is just insane. So I'm not saying don't get an upgraded bulkhead, but what I am saying is instead of going out and picking up the upgraded bulkhead, first get the hinge pin kit because you're gonna find that you're gonna probably to your liking and how big of air you get in your style of bashing, you'll find that the rear hinge pin kit will actually protect your stock bulkhead. That is if there's one thing I want you guys to get from this video is this shield around the bulkhead from M2C will even go a huge way when protecting the stock one. So anyway, the next thing that I want to talk about is the reason why the flat heads actually go on the inside of the vehicle as opposed to the outside. Technically, you can actually install it in reverse. You can put the flat heads on this side and the lock nuts on this side. However, the reason why the flatheads go on the inside of the vehicle is because they're a set and forget part. Basically, once you've red Loctited both of these flat nuts onto the end, there's really no need ever for you to have to remove them because if you're gonna go into your vehicle and do any maintenance work, you're just gonna need to go in and remove these, and it's going to be easy access to the rear. These are designed to come off and on. You don't have to red Loctite these. So basically, for maintenance purposes, you're going to find that you'll be able to just slide this out and it'll stay as is. So the first thing you're going to want to do is actually just red Loctite these onto the pins and then tighten it down to where it stops threading, and there you go, you're set with these. Now, there is something else that I wanted to point out in regards to the front hinge pin installation. Let's just presuppose that this is the front end layout, okay? Here's the front hinge pin kit from M2C, part number 125. So let's just assume this was the front of the vehicle. In fact, this would still look similar because this would be on the inside, and this is now the front of the vehicle going, let's say the vehicle's driving this direction, okay? Now, if you were installing the front installation setup, these would end up being on the inside of the vehicle. Again, there is a slight difference in the look for this piece in the front. Instead, it looks like this. It's got a rounded out spot for the inner hinge pin. And just so you guys know, you may not have known this, but let me just explain this real quick. Your vehicle, there's an actual proper name for these hinge pin braces, if you want to call them that. Not the hinge pins, but the actual blocks. So if you look at the front of the vehicle like this, okay? The front one is called the A block. The front inner one is called a B block. The rear inner is the C block, and the rear outer is the D block, okay? So now that I've said that, I'll be able to explain it a little bit easier to you. If we were to make believe this was the front of the vehicle, this was the A block, and this was the B block. M2C, ever since the V5 and the EXB came out, they made a modification to the front, or the A block, to this one, and they came out with a part called Part 3985, the EXB front A block. Now you'll notice, if I cut this out, you'll see that it's got the same exact shape as this A block. However, let me just pull that out so I can look at them side by side. However, this has all of the pre-built-in upgrades that you need to attach the bottom of the EXB right into the bulkhead, through the bottom of the chassis, everything, okay? So I would replace this piece with, that would be now the A block. Heck, we might as well just remove this real quick so I can actually, make it like I'm talking about the actual front end. So now we're talking about the front end. Here's the rear. So these two pieces are the same, except for one's been upgraded. And then this is the rear. Now for the front end, you still want to put these little flat hubs on the inside. All the Delrin stuff still facing inward. And the thing is though, is Mitch was finding that, or a lot of people were finding that when they go to screw in this, when they screw this in, that this nut was actually getting in way of two vertical screws that come up into the body. So if you look at the front end here, you can actually see right in here, there's two vertical screws that go up from the body into the composite piece. This composite piece is actually designed completely differently, and Mitch and Avery did away with the need for the vertical screw that goes up. However, that vertical screw is needed when you're installing the EXB front bumper. And so when you put that vertical screw up, it ends up getting in the way of this flat washer. So, believe it or not, Mitch and Avery designed a new pin that's called a captured hinge pin, and I'll show you what it looks like. And this again was designed mostly because with the front end in mind. These can still be used on the rear end. However, if you look at this, there's no need to put a flat head, there's no need to Loctite it on. You can simply just, like I was telling you, this, once you put this on and leave it, it's basically a set and forget piece. Well, that's why they designed this new one, because if it's a set and forget component, why not just build it into the pin itself with a much smaller profile. The profile now of, I'll just set this back here. The profile of this now is so much smaller that when you push it in, it doesn't end up getting in the way of those upward facing screws for the EXB bumper. But also, this piece was redesigned for the EXB bumper to have all of this new material added to accommodate for the upward or the vertical screws that go up through the bumper into the body. And now it's all one beautiful piece. Whereas if you didn't have this new designed piece in the front end, you wouldn't be able to install the EXB bumper without doing a massive amount of modifications to that. Now it is possible to do it, and there's a video right here if you want to check it out, to where if you've still got, if you just happen to order M2C's front hinge pin kit and you didn't end up getting this upgraded piece for EXB bumper, you can still modify the plastic components of your bumper to accommodate for using basically the EXB bumper. But there's a lot of work put into it, and there's a video you can watch on how to do that. And I'm not going to make a video on it because I instead decided to just buy this upgraded piece. I'd rather the whole thing be aluminum, and that's just going to make it even stronger, especially when using the front EXB bumper. So again, I know it's sort of confusing because I'm making believe that this is the front setup, but I just want you guys to know that I am actually going to use the, let me just go ahead and put this rear one back and put this rear one back, because we're actually talking about the rear end now. Flat washer, move that back. Flat washer's on here. I've decided though, and the reason, that's why I wanted to explain all this about the front, is because I've decided I'm gonna use the captured pin instead of the ones that came with it. So I'm not even gonna end up using these flat nuts. I'm not even gonna use them. So I'd end up putting this back. I still am going to use the Delrin washers. This was just designed to make life a little easier, but it is still possible to run with the classic flat nut for the front end, and you'll be fine. It's just a tight fit between that upward screw and this thing. It's just super tight and frustrating. And you can use these on the front or the rear. Again, they were mostly designed for the front just to free up space, but you can use them on the rear. So I'm gonna go ahead and use these on the rear. If you are interested in actually picking up these captured variants, then they are part number M2C 3510. Anyway, I think I've gone on long enough for this M2C explained video. Instead of seeing me put all this back together, since I am planning on putting on a new shock tower, and ultimately I'm going to be going into great detail showing the differences between the rear shock tower, whether you're talking about the V4 stock shock tower, the V5 shock tower, the V4 shock tower, even this Just Bash It shock tower, and just kind of showing the structural integrity differences between all of them and going into detail as to why M2C is the golden standard. Another thing that I'm going to be installing in this rear end project are rear end M2C drive shafts. These things are amazing, and I'm going to actually take, and show you guys the actual specs, the differences up close as to what makes these things so amazing. So stay tuned for that next M2C explained video. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching East Tactics, watching my channel. I really appreciate all the love and support that I get from everybody. The jump competitions have been a ton of fun. If any of you guys want to throw a little bit of love toward my channel, hit me up on Patreon. It goes a long way, helps me, keep the channel going. You can also check the link in the description. I've got t-shirts that you can pick up from a third-party company that I kind of linked up with for, RC related t-shirts, but I've designed a few logos that I think are really cool. I would love it if you guys were to go check them out. Some of them have my logo, some of them just basically have like the silhouette of an RC basher with the word basher. I mean, in my opinion, I think they're awesome. But there's also a ton of other shirts from the actual storefront that are RC related that I pulled into my own little store. If any of you guys ever do have any questions about this company, if you have a channel and you want to like team up with them, I mean, I think it's pretty cool. So just feel free to hit me up in the comment section. I'd love to share the details with you. So yeah, just basically stay tuned for some upcoming M2C explained videos. And for now, stay cool. East Tactics out.